We used to think that the hardest part of adult friendships was finding the time, and it turns out we were wrong. The hardest part is navigating the economics of every single social interaction where everybody is stressed out about money. The thing that nobody wants to admit about friendships in today's age is that we're not just experiencing a loneliness epidemic, we are living through a friendship recession, and it is costing us way more than just our money. I'm Hannah, and on my channel, I decode the hidden psychology behind our financial decisions. Today, I want to talk about something that hits differently than your typical money anxiety. Because this isn't about whether or not you can afford your rent or if you're saving for retirement. This is about whether you can afford to keep the people you love in your life. And before you say, oh, just spend less with your friends, trust me, your brain has a few things to say about that. Things involving loss aversion, social anxiety, and your literal survival instincts. So, yes, it gets deep. Let's get into it. According to a recent survey by Ally Bank, people spend an average of $250 each month on activities with friends. And I think in a lot of cases, we end up spending a lot more. That is $3,000 a year just on social spending. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's not that much. But what that number doesn't capture is the emotional tax of every single decision when money has infiltrated so much of our relationships. Think about the certain dynamics that come with money and friendships today. Imagine you go to a group dinner and everyone orders a surf and turf and you get a side salad. Or you get asked to go on a bachelorette trip that costs have just ballooned and you don't know what to do. You feel like you have to go and spend the money, right? Or a birthday party where you feel like if you say no, the invites will stop coming. And this is often a calculus in every single interaction we have. So much of the way that we spend time with our friends has become a sort of cost benefit analysis. And the kicker to all of this is that in the same survey, 1 in 5 people said that lifestyle or money differences actually led to a friendship breakup. Not drifting apart, not moving away. Money differences ended the friendship. So I want to be honest with you. I've been on both sides of this. I've been the person that's stretching my budget to keep up with my friends, feeling anxious while I'm kind of saying yes to everything because I feel like I have to do it to be able to maintain friends, right? I've also been the person that didn't realize my suggestion of let's go to this nice restaurant free to stress for somebody that I cared about. And the worst part is that in both situations, you're just not always fully present. When I was overspending, I was often really resentful and calculating the whole time. When I was more oblivious, I was accidentally creating distance in friendships that I really value. So much of this is just so emotionally loaded. And a lot of us just don't realize it because, again, so much of our money decisions are made on kind of autopilot or just kind of running in the background without us feeling it. And I think throughout, writing about this topic and researching this topic, I really did realize that the very act of stretching yourself financially to maintain a friendship creates distance within it. You end up commodifying the connections that you are trying to preserve. All right, so I want to talk about why navigating money and friendships is so psychologically complicated because it isn't just about the money. Your brain is wired to feel losses more intensely than gains. This is basic behavioral economics. We experience the pain of losing $50 about twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining $50. This has been well documented. But what happens when you apply this to friendships? During a loneliness epidemic, when inflation is super high and everything is super expensive, that effect gets amplified. See, belonging has always been a human survival mechanism, as essential as food or shelter. Social exclusion actually activates the same parts of the brain as physical pain. Rejection doesn't just hurt metaphorically, it hurts literally. So when you're deciding whether to skip that brunch, your brain might not be just calculating the financial impact, it's also calculating the potential loss of belonging. That's how the whole idea of FOMO came up, right? That's why the decision can create so much internal stress for you. And this isn't being dramatic. Your nervous system often genuinely cannot tell the difference between missing brunch and risking social exile. It's like our mammalian brain. Something that's really worth noticing is think about when was the last time you hung out with friends without spending money? So much of our social experiences these days are tied to consumption. If you think about group dinners, destination weddings, fitness classes, even free activities often end up costing something when you factor in the coffee or the thing you just bought along the way. And this fundamentally shifts the psychology of friendship. When every social interaction requires spending, every yes becomes a financial transaction. And every no feels like a withdrawal, both from your bank account and from the relationship. And I want to just pause and talk about the kind of structural factors here, because of course, things have gotten more expensive. Third places, like really low cost or free places to hang out, have become less and less prevalent. So it actually is genuinely harder to hang out with your friends and not spend money, right? So it's important to point that out. But I want to get into kind of the dynamics of the actual friendships, right? I want to talk about the rise of like the apps. And what I mean is by that is like Venmo and Splitwise. They have actually changed money group dynamics and they've made them money and transactions hyper visible in ways that like kind of completely changed the game. So now with these apps, you can split costs down to the penny, which is yes, egalitarian, but we actually have lost something in the process, which is the social buffer that used to exist around money and friendships. Before there was reciprocity, right? Like I'll get this one, you get that. And the back and forth actually helped bolster social ties. Now everything feels a lot more transactional, right? Like who requested what, how long someone takes you to pay you back, whether you have to remind them. All of these are like data points about someone's money situation, and it just makes money a lot more of a visible thing, and it doesn't allow for the reciprocity that can help strengthen social bonds. Like the social becomes financial, the financial becomes social. And you kind of feel like you're in this like constant state of economic negotiation with your friends. And if there's inequality in a friendship, like one person makes more than the other, that introduces a really layered and complex dynamic that often you're navigating individually. Like because money isn't something that most people talk about, we're all kind of internalizing it and dealing with it and not kind of bringing it to the surface, right? Economic inequality doesn't exist just in neighborhoods or income brackets. It exists inside friend groups. Maybe you have a friend that can easily drop $600 on dinner while somebody else doesn't feel like they can afford groceries. Research on class-based friendship patterns show that social class significantly influences friendship dynamics. And there's a feedback loop here, right? Like the more expensive it is to maintain a friendship, the less economically diverse friend groups will be in the future, right? So we end up with kind of this like friendship privilege, right? Your social connections become increasingly tied to your economic status. And this creates stress around literally every decision. Where to grab coffee, where to go on vacation. Even something as simple as like, let's meet up, suddenly has these like financial implications that you have to navigate. And when there's a wealth gap between friends, the emotional labor can be exhausting because, again, a lot of it is internalized and we don't talk about it. So, like, maybe the lower earner feels shame for declining or needing to split the check or do lower cost things. Maybe the higher earner feels like that guilt or like that pressure that they need to cover the costs or like worry about like feeling out of touch. Either way, the friendship becomes emotionally loaded. In fact, many people would rather talk about politics, dating, or even death before they talk about money with their friends. And I think the reason why is because money has become a stand in for all of our other hopes and fears: belonging, identity, security, how we want other people to perceive us. And what gets really interesting at the root of this is that when traditional markers of adulthood feel out of reach, like marriage, homeownership, stable careers, and I think in the past couple of years it has, people have felt like the American dream is like declining, we will find new ways to signal that we're doing okay. And social spending becomes one of those ways. Like going out with friends and sharing things on your social media isn't just like sharing what you're doing. Whether you realize it or not, it is a way to signal your social status. All those meals out, concerts, retreats, vacations, they become part of this like personal persona that you are putting online. And it's very hard to opt out of that when everybody is performing. And social media doesn't just broadcast our lives, it curates them. And in doing so, it completely inflates our perception of what normal looks like. Research shows that social media encourages overspending through comparison, impulse buying, and FOMO, but it actually does go deeper than that. We don't just see our friends spending, we see them happy while spending, right? And that creates a sort of double bind where like FOMO meets financial anxiety in your nervous system. And you're starting to wonder if you're missing more than fun. And if you feel like, I'm falling behind economically, socially, existentially, like all of those things get like wrapped up together. And this creates perfect conditions for money dysmorphia, which is very prevalent today. And it's basically this distorted perception that you're worse off than your peers, even when you might not be. Studies show that FOMO significantly contributes to money anxiety, which kind of creates this vicious cycle where social media consumption leads to financial stress, which leads to social isolation, which leads to more social media consumption. And your brain literally cannot handle this well. So here's a question that not many people want to ask, but we all need to consider, which is, when we spend money to maintain our friendships, what are we actually purchasing? I think a lot of people are purchasing belonging, protection against social isolation in an increasingly lonely world, identity validation, proof that we're successful enough to participate in the economy, or emotional regulation, like relief from like this anxiety we feel through social connection. Or just we feeling we have to invest in our relationships because we need to maintain access to our social safety net. And the more that we treat friendship as a financial investment, the more transactional and fragile those relationships become. Okay, so What do we actually do with all this? Because I know you're probably thinking, like, okay, this makes sense, but like, how do I actually handle it without losing all my friends? And I want to kind of walk through a few strategies on how to navigate money in your friendships. The first is recognizing when social spending is actually emotional spending. So, like, ask yourself, are you going to that dinner because you genuinely want to go or because you're afraid what declining means for your friendship? Something that your brain really needs to understand is that declining an invitation is not the same as rejecting the person. And I know it can feel that way, like your nervous system is literally screaming that it is, but you can separate your money decisions from your worth as a friend. The second strategy is to kind of reframe the language around money. So instead of saying, like, oh, I can't afford that, which can often trigger like shame for you and maybe like awkwardness in the interaction, try to say, like, oh, I'm actually just prioritizing other things right now. Can we do something lower cost? And this language actually does matter. And it changes the way you think about your money, like your money mindset. And it also can remove a lot of the, like, negative emotions associated. And it really frames you as somebody that has more agency over your decisions because you do. And what's really interesting is that you might be surprised how many people feel the same way. Like maybe the other person is dreading it too and like assume that you want it to go, right? Like just putting it out there and like talking about money more openly with people is just like a net good thing. Like money transparency is a net thing. Okay, so the third strategy is like where you need to get a little bit creative and think to yourself, like, what if you became the person who suggested alternatives that don't center spending? Like, host a potluck, go for a walk, have a movie night at home, do a book exchange. The uncomfortable truth that comes with this is that the friends who resist these alternatives might be revealing something about what they actually value in the relationship. If somebody only wants to see you when money's being spent, that's not really about the friendship. That's about the performance of this friendship. The fourth thing is having the awkward conversation. And I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes you just need to have it, right? Because what I've learned is that the anticipation of talking about money in a friendship is often worse than the actual conversation. Like you could try something and just say like, "Hey, I have to be honest with you right now. I'm trying to be more intentional with my money, which means I might need to pass on some things or suggest lower cost alternatives. Our friendship is important to me, and I don't want money to create distance between us." Most people will respect that. And the ones that don't, that might be information that you needed anyway. What I want you to understand is that this isn't just about your personal finances or your individual friendships. Economic inequality is reshaping our social relationships in ways that we are only beginning to understand. We need new models of community that do not require constant financial participation. We need to revive these third places, like these low cost, free places to hang out, like community spaces that aren't home and work, libraries, parks, community centers, just places where connection does not come with a price tag. And we also need a social system where we can acknowledge money differences without judgment, where opting out of an expensive plan doesn't mean you're opting out of belonging. So I want to end this video by leaving you with some questions to just sit with. And the first is, how has economic stress changed your friendships? What would your social life look like if money were not a factor? Are you spending money on your relationships or the appearance of your relationships? And most importantly, what type of friend do you want to be and what kind do you want to have? Because what I've learned, sometimes the hard way, is that the question isn't whether money affects our relationships, because it does. It always has. The real question is whether we can build relationships strong enough to acknowledge that the reality without being destroyed by it. Okay, well, if you've got to the end of the video, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, how have you experienced friendship friction around your money? How did you handle it? What worked, what didn't? And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Talking about money and friendships is one of the best things we can do for our friendships. If you want to go deeper in the psychology of money, I also have a newsletter where I break down these topics even more. The link is in my bio. Thank you for watching. Take care of your brain and take care of your friendships.